My name is Abina Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jah, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Every Thursday, it's time to talk tough. Today, we are talking tough on the fight against corruption. What is corruption? What is the fight against corruption? How do we know that we are fighting corruption? What are some of the signs that there is a fight against corruption? When the fight is genuine, or is it lip service? Is it political posturing? Is it witch hunting? How can we tell? Okay, what are signs that we are winning or losing the fight against corruption? What are those signs that can tell us? We want to. We have some people here who have been in the corruption fight, so we want to ask them really, and we want to look at our past, the last three presidents. President Shirley, President Weah, President Bouaka. How do we compare their fight against corruption so we can have idea as to what the fight against corruption look like and if we are winning or losing? Let me welcome the man who worked with three Liberian presidents, Dr. Abdullah Dukle. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dennis. Happy to be here.
Thank you. When we talk about corruption, we're talking governance. And so let's welcome our governance advisor, Mr. Ahmed Saleh. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dennis. Let's talk about it.
For the first time, not on Focus on Liberia, but on Tough Talking Thursday, let me welcome political commentator Dr. George Y. Williams on Tough Talking Thursday. Welcome, Doc.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy for the invite.
Thank you. Let me welcome Attorney Wanda Konyere Fremont, a former vice presidential candidate in 2017. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. It's nice to be here. And, I love talking about governance and anti-graft issues. So you made my day. Good to be here.
Who you vice presidential candidate? For who?
Yeah.
For who?
I ran along with Oscar Cooper.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Dr. William, please face your background there. So let me welcome our public financial management practitioner. He's soon to succeed to be our resident economist because Depu is in as the finance minister now, so we need a replacement. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Dennis. Good to be here.
Let me welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is Thursday, and this is Tough Talking Thursday. Let's talk about the fight against corruption. Let me start with Dr. George William because that teacher, he's in education. What does the fight against corruption mean to you? Let's basic definition. When they say people
Well,
fighting corruption, how do you define that?
there is there can be no conclusive and definitive definition for the fight except an express recorded set of actions meant to ensure public accountability and transparency in public service. Different commentators or different actors will provide you definition from their viewpoint. As an educator, as a novice economist, I would say, it's the whole process, a committed process by government to ensure transparency and accountability in public service.
Thank you. Attorney Konye, you work with the LSCC at some point. The LSCC has its own definition for corruption. What is it? How do you look at corruption?
Yes, I did work with the LSCC for 4.5 years, and I worked with the FIU for like 3 years. So it's a combined 7.5 years with anti-graft institutions. But corruption has very wide scope. But yes, for the most part, it's like trying to use public resources for your personal benefit, and it may not necessarily be trading with money and all of that, but you can, use your influence unduly, for maybe benefit of yourself or your relatives, but so anything along those lines we classify as corruption. But one of the things that we haven't done is to have a comprehensive statute on corruption. So our corruption statute and regulation are in bits and pieces across several criminal laws. So we don't really have it defined under Liberian law. The closest we have to it is the money laundering statute, but it doesn't comprehensively cover, especially bribery and conflict of interest, those kinds of things is still missing under Liberian law.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, when we say the fight against corruption from the government standpoint, what are they exactly talking about here? Are they measures? Are they, is it some come to Jesus movement? What is it?
It depends on who's running the government and what their political objectives are. Specifically in our context. But typically a government will fight against corruption when a government wants to strengthen rule of law, when a government wants to ensure that citizens, no one is above the law, that there are standards, clearly defined laws and policies whereby institutions are respected. Institutionalism is respected. I mean, there's a distinction there, so that for example, when someone is in authority, like Mr. Freeman was saying, and such a person does not abuse their power. They do not abuse their power to take away other citizens' rights or to use their power unduly to say hire people, give preferences to people who are not qualified to be in certain roles, give contracts to people or companies or organizations that are not qualified to compete or to carry out a particular function of the government. A government will fight against corruption when the government is trying to strengthen its system and streamline processes so that you close loopholes around waste, so that you ensure that people are not taking public resources for their personal aggrandizement, personal benefit. They're not using government property, government asset, vehicles, and things like that, government buildings. There's so many aspects of corruption and fight against corruption that we don't really talk about. We look at how much money somebody has stolen, how somebody diverted public resources, public funds to their personal benefit, and maybe the government is going after that to try to recover those ill-gotten resources back to government coffers. So there's a whole wide range of different things that one could be doing and one could be looking at if one wanted to really fight corruption.
Thank you. Dr. Douglas, you were right there with President Saleh when she declared a war on corruption. I mean, give me some practical steps that she took. If I were with somebody and they say we come and fight corruption today, do I wear gloves? So what does it look like being with the president and fighting against corruption? What does she do?
Well, I think she was looking at corruption from a very basic point of view, from a social point of view. Say the whole society is kind of corrupt because people are so poor. And she said she had 3 steps. I think one was educate people about what is corruption, is damages that goes to society. The second one was people paying them wages, living wages to allow them to live so that they don't engage in petty theft. And then the third one was enforcement of laws. So as you see, I mean, that was her big dream at the beginning of the tenure. And somehow, I think you can give her credit for putting in place the institution of integrity, GAC, LSCC, and making them totally independent. I think probably if it had continued the way it was set up at the beginning, I think we'll have the fight of corruption will have gone far. But then again came the second term, and things started to be fragilize, sort of to fall apart, really. And that's when she said, corruption has become a vampire because she could no longer control it. It was too close to herself, so she just threw her arm in the air and left it there. And then Mr. Weah came in. You didn't ask me about him, but definitely we know what he did with them, what he did with the institutions. They all almost died. I mean,
right. And we'll come to the comparison. Let me go to Thomas. Thomas, I watched a lot, and people were surprised that I'm a big fan of MMA, where the people the kickboxing and stuff like that. So when I see your fight, I see 2 fighters. I see they have gears out of the gloves, the mouthpiece. I see referees. I also see spectators. In the fight of, and you've been, you follow these things a lot, and you have a governance. It was good governance, right? So when we say the fight against corruption, using my MMA analogy, what are all the things involved? Do we have fighters? Do they have the right gloves and the mouthpiece and everything else? And do we have referees to make sure that nobody is infringing on the rules during this fight? How does that analogy apply to governance in Liberia when it comes to the fight against corruption?
Thank you, Dennis. I just want to give a little bit of a background to this whole issue of the fight against corruption and all of that. So even before our civil war, we had always had the issue of corruption. So when the Accra Peace Accord was heard and peace was returning to Liberia, all of the development partners, the US government, the regional bodies, they all came together and said that this country has an issue or it has a history of corruption. So what do we do to be able to make sure that after the Civil War, we don't go back to the situation of what it was before the Civil War? This is the concern that gave birth to GMAP. Imagine they had to bring in people who were from other countries and they deploy them to our institutions that are mostly revenue generating institutions. They were at the port, they were at the different institutions. And that continued for a couple of years after the Civil War to be able to address this issue of corruption. And then after the Civil War, when our debt was being relieved, there were some preconditions that were tied into that debt relief package, because the broader concept about debt relief was that these countries are very poor. We are going to remove this debt burden from their head so that they can be able to reinvest in their own people. So part of that reinvestment meant they had to manage resources better. So this is why you saw when as part of that debt relief, the GAC was doing a lot of audit after the Civil War when John Molu was Auditor General. So they had to do these different audits, and the institutional framework also needed to be built to be able to fight corruption. And that's how the Governance Commission did a lot of work to establish the GAC, no, not the GAC, the LACC, and then eventually we saw the Internet Audit Secretariat. So I'm just trying to say that this broader issue of fighting corruption has to be done in different ways. And like Dr. Du said, there's an educational component. Like Ahmed said, there's an institutional framework. And that institutional framework brought the PPCC and all of these different institutions into place so that we can be able to address the issue of corruption. But it has to be broad-based. You have to fight it from the revenue generation side. LRA, for instance, they have to put measures into place. So there's a lot that we have been doing. But I would want to close on this. Even though we credit Madam Seli for establishing the institution, but our route that we took with our LACC was a bit different from other countries. Like when Sierra Leone created their LACC in 2004, they outrightly gave a prosecutorial power to their LACC. For us, we subjected the LACC to the Ministry of Justice, and that's where a lot of the prosecution used to be stored. The LACC will do their work, they send it to the Ministry of Justice, and they say you don't have sufficient evidence. So many of the cases die between these two institutions until the recent amendment was done to give them prosecutorial power. So I think the fight is broadly, you build the institutions, strengthen them, give them the autonomy, and give them the resources that they need to be able to go out there, identify corruption, fight it. But overall, people mostly look at prosecution. Once you don't prosecute, people believe that you are not fighting corruption. And once you don't win the cases and recover the asset. But there's a lot that you can do to fight corruption.
Thank you. Jimmy, what should the fight against corruption look like?
Thank you, Dennis. People have been answering this age-old question forever. First of all, corruption has to be shamed. If you're in a society where you are hailed, even though you were wrought with corruption, that's not going to discourage corruption. So we have to bring shame to corruption, if it's going to be effective. They talk about Singapore doing it. They made it so you will disgraced if you be corrupt. We don't disgrace people from being corrupt. And until we have the gumption, the mindset that despite your wealth, you are despicable, we have to go to that depth. And also we have to start early. We have to teach the ills of corruption, the shame of corruption in elementary school, all the way throughout. It's difficult when you're dealing with people who are older. The only way you can change behavior like that is stringent punitive actions. But when it comes to the building of the mind, the embracing of culture and ethics and virtue, you can start early. So that way, it will have a conflicting effect on a person when they are exposed to it. I will tell you my personal experience. I went home and I was getting in with the regime at the time. But when I noticed that I will be brought into things that I didn't want to do, I went away from it. Because something's got to be built in your psyche that this is not a behavior you want to continue. And that helps you, despite being poor, you start not having money, you are equipped to fight, to resist the temptations and allure of ill-gotten money. So we have to teach it, and we have to shame it, and we have to punish it severely.
Thank you. I want us to go around the room and answer one basic question, similar to what Jimmy answered. What should this fight look like? what are the signs of a genuine fight against corruption? That when we see them, we say, yes, nobody else has to tell you. You know it, that this is a genuine fight against corruption. Tom, let me start with you.
Well, like I said previously, you see the fight against corruption is not only on the prosecution side. For instance, the LSCC has a surveillance function. They need to keep surveillance on these different institutions. Once you hear that something is fishy out there, you go out there and go and identify it. So that surveillance function that the LACC has, if they can really exercise it and be in these institutions, it can be able to create fear within the institutions and people will not be able to get involved. The other thing we need to do to really make sure that this is a genuine fight is to ensure that the Internal Audit Secretariat is really strengthened, because couple of years when this whole fight about the about corruption started in Liberia was, GSC does a post audit. That means they give you the money, you use all of the money, and then the GSC comes at the end of the fiscal year to do an audit. By that time, the money is gone. So the government realized that there's a weakness there. That's how they brought in the IAA. So the IAA agents are seated in the different institutions. When the transaction is taking place, they follow the process to make sure that it's compliant with the PPCC law, is compliant with the PFM law and all of that. But we have had some situations in the different agencies where the IAA agent will say that this process should not go forward, and the head of the entity will say, I override it. Anything that happens tomorrow, come to me. I will take the responsibility. I will take the responsibility. And therefore, they override the IAA agent and they move forward. We have also seen some a news report come up previously with IAA agents going into the institutions. They are paid by the IAA and they start to even take salary from the institutions where they are. It already compromised them. So for this to really be genuine, like Jimmy was saying, we have to make sure we stop it from happening. And that's how all of these mechanisms are in place to make sure that it does not happen. So let's stop it first. But if it does happen, if people fall through the crack and it happens, that's how it goes through prosecution. And I just wanted to highlight the issue of the different forms of corruption. There is petty and there is grain corruption. Grain corruption is those big ones, like the concessions. People will go and take 2 million, 3 million and award a concession. That's grain corruption. It affects us more than a police officer taking $5 to drop the rope for you to pass. That's optional corruption, but the magnitude is different. So for this fight to really be genuine, we have to make sure that, I mean, everyone is on the war front and really fighting. The IAA, the LACC, the GAC, they are all fighting to make sure that it does not happen. But if it does happen, let's make sure we can grind the people down. If they are to go to court, let them go to court. If they are guilty, let them serve sentence. Because after 20 years of civil war, I think the LACC has prosecuted, I think, 2 or 3 cases that have really gone to court and people were guilty. So we have to make sure that that is improved.
Thank you. Attorney Freeman.
Okay, so I would just say what Thomas has said, I just take all of that and allocate it as 20%. And the other 20% is to rethink the way we organize our Ministry of Justice and the LMP and the LSCC. In a lot of countries, the MOJ, there's a Department of Public Prosecution. That department is supposed to be independent. It should not serve at the will and pleasure of the president. That's a big problem, because that is part of the reason why when the ruling party does wrong, the Justice Ministry look the other way. The LMP look the other way. But the moment an opposition person or somebody who is not part of the ruling party does wrong, they are energized almost 10 times to go after you. So there are some structural issues tied to these statutes and the Constitution in a way that has to be resolved. But let me tell you, that's another 20. The remaining 60% is to jail people. There is no other way around it. And that's why Marinseli failed. Because in her first term, she was putting in the structures. That's when I worked with the LACC. But when we started to really start moving after some people who she was like maybe politically friends with or whatever, she wasn't happy, you know. So when you're fighting corruption, it is the system that has to work, and no one individual should be in a position to stop that system from working. But as it stands, the president has a predominant role. He can stop people from carrying on investigation and prevent it. And the ruling party, by virtue of that, they do have a role. And that is why you see during CDC, Jefferson County, they could probably kill somebody on the street, and the LMP will look the other way. Justice Ministry will say nothing. So what you need to do, there is no way you can fight corruption. 60% of that fight is to jail people. People have, and when I say jail, I'm not talking about petty corruption. You can prosecute that, that's fine. Nothing wrong with it. But you have to jail the ministers, the directors. Take, for example, take the Bwaka case. Right in Bwaka office, you have 2 people there committing crimes. And Mr. Bwaka is doing absolutely nothing about it. And he's going around looking for people to prosecute. You got people right in your office committing crime for crisis. Start there, prosecute them. So if you don't put people in jail, there is no way you will fight corruption. That is 60% of the corruption fight.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Dukley, somewhere I read that in order to fight corruption, first, let you answer the same question here, that what are the signs of a genuine fight against corruption? What will you see to say, yes, this is a true fight?
I think, I think people say that, everybody's saying the same thing. You need institutions to work. I think you need institutions to be staffed with professionals, with integrity, and also have them work totally in total freedom. So you don't have to, they're not being second guessed like he says, but Freeman says it was happening with the LSCC and presidential leave. But in that case, I would say also, it depends sometimes on who runs it. I remember, John Morley, all the time he was there till he left, I don't think he had any problem doing what he wanted to do. He conducted his audits and went everywhere he wanted to go and made political comments at some time that could have probably ended his contract, but he stayed on and did his work. And I know at PPCC, Dobo Jala was there, and he also resisted. I remember sometimes that's a story that goes around that the president wanted to do a favor to somebody. He said, if I sign this, I'll sign my letter of resignation at the same time. The president said, okay, carry your trouble. So people resist those things. So if you don't resist, you don't have that integrity, and you say, oh, well, maybe the president will not like this because it's John Brown, president friend. Then you're not doing your job. You're not being professional. The thing is, you have to, if you're you are LSCC, you have to be able to stand to the president and say, Madam President, either we do this or we don't do it. But, we're going to do it anyway. Even in the WIA, LSCC went after one of their own members, and they went after the Minister of Agriculture. Well, it cost them their job, but they did. So I think sometimes you just have to stand up to the powers and say, hey, I'm a professional, you're a politician, I'm doing my job.
Thank you. Dr. William, someone told me, say, for us to know that you are fighting corruption, the fight should be fair. Equity. That fight should be blind. Like I think it was Jimmy who was saying it. Like you one party, the people that are on your side, you don't prosecute them, right? And it should also be within the rule of law, right? You can just do it because you want people. So let's talk a little bit about that. Fairness and within the confines of the law.
The fight has to be objective. It cannot be subjective. We have to be careful that every government has its path in terms of its methodology, its targets. Some targets are easier to arrest than other targets. And so, for example, in our current situation back home, You see that the UP government is targeting people out of audit reports. They haven't gone back to previous audit reports. They're working with the ones before them at this time. But yeah, their public sentiments will speak against objectivity to the fight being more subjective with what's going on, quote unquote, in the president's office. I think as we look at the fight against corruption, we also have to look at leadership in context. And I go all the way back to the interim government under Dr. Sawyer. One of Dr. Sawyer's illusion was that he will entertain corruption for the purpose of peace. Now, many of us civic activists at the time spoke up against that. We thought it didn't make sense. But Dr. Sawyer found himself within the narrow enclave of Monrovia and managing that narrow enclave. That's no excuse whatsoever. That's no excuse, but the context of the times are different. Fast forward to Madame Salih, a proponent of graft, against graft, as far back as the 70s. She came in, in fact, she lauded over such situations. She had no excuse. She had the institutions. She knew what it took to make those institutions work. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And so that speaks to the point of leadership. No corruption fight, no commitment to the anti-corruption fight can be meaningful if there isn't the right leadership to lead that process. And so we fast forward to President Blackard. It's been 6 months. It's been 6 months. Like many leaders before him, he is taking steps. Now, how far those steps are going to go, we will know in the next 6 months. It is way early for us to determine whether or not he's been objective by what he's doing. All right? We can only watch, keep his feet to the fire, and ensure that this is not a cosmetic exercise, that he's committed to it. We're going to see the process through. I hear my colleagues talk about jail. It shouldn't stop at jailing. It should not stop at jailing. People shouldn't only go to jail. Properties need to be confiscated. Properties need to be confiscated. And once that happens, an auction, so much so that whether the government is still in power or not, those people have no way of reclaiming those properties. But for me, and maybe my reservation with President Blackard is this. You have, and you're definitely going to be a one-term president. You've had time to envision what kind of government you wanted to put in. I would suppose that by now, we would have had a system in place, a framework in place that will ensure that anyone, regardless of who it is, ethnicity, religion, regardless of who it is, whoever is coming into government would have gone through an integrity audit. And what is an integrity audit? An integrity audit is simply to investigate whatever nominees the president has on his book or on his table. Investigate those nominees to ensure that, one, they pay taxes. Yeah. Two, their names are not recorded in any legal pending cases around graft and what have you, that the audit reports from the IAA and the GAC they're all cleared from there, the LSCC. So setting up an intergovernmental agency to clear nominees to serve in the public, even those applying for elections. Before the NEC clears you to become a candidate, you must have gone through an integrity audit.
Yeah.
So much so that it saves the presidency the embarrassment of appointing someone, and tomorrow the public is saying, hey, this guy has a situation in court. He owes the country this much money. He hasn't paid his taxes. You know? And so
thank you.
Leadership is critical. Systems are critical as well.
Thank you. Mr. Salih, you know, and in all this fight too, we're looking for strategy, because when there's no strategy, if we don't see strategy, someone described it like a child playing tennis ball, right? You know how the child kicks it, but don't know how to the extent where it's going. Mr. Salif, how can we tell that the fight against corruption is not a lip service, it's not political posturing, it's not witch hunt, it's not what in Labrador now they call vla? How can you tell? Or how can you keep it void of it being looked at as such?
Mhm. Yeah, that is a very important component. No matter how people try to politicize, a president's moves against corruption, if the actions that are taken, those actions are within the law, those actions are consistent with existing law, and like someone said, as blind, that is really just looking at audit reports, looking at so for example, this assets recovery uh, process. Say if you had that asset recovery task force or commission, whatever it is, you really constituted it well. It is something that is operating within the Constitution, within the ambit of law, and they are well staffed, well resourced. They're doing investigation. They have professionals who are analysts doing forensic work, doing strong legal work, investigating, following the money, following fraud, following different, paper trails to see, where money. So let's go with a grand theft of public funds. That's really what is eating the country up. Where three people would take $6 million. Somebody who has access to budget, can sort of maneuver $11 million or something, and nobody can really trace where that money. And yeah, poor country like ours, that should not be happening. I mean, really, literally, people are dying as a result of that kind of action. Some $22 million, or whatever it is, right? And so my point is, you institute a system that is respectful of what's called due process of law. A system that anyone, even a child, will say, well, but they're not going after just the other political party people, this other political party people. They're going after where the evidence leads. And how do you construct, sort of this evidence or a theory of a system of it that leads somewhere? You're not identifying somebody first. You're looking at if your path is an audit report or various audit reports, and you follow those and see where they're leading you, and then you investigate that, and whose names emerge. You make sure that you investigate that really thoroughly, that you're not just going after people because of some big names or whatnot, regardless of what are big names or small names, who's connected to them. Our country is a small country. Everybody knows everybody. Everyone knows what's happening, Dennis. If you put in a professional system, such as I'm describing and others have talked about, it's very easy to convince our people that this is genuine, this is objective, this is not going after any particular political party or individual at all. So it boils down to system, it boils down to institutions. We already have integrity institutions people have named, but if you have them, they don't have teeth, they can't prosecute, they can't imprison people, you can't fire people, and can recover property and seize them and return them to public, make them accessible to the public, to the government. Then it resembles lip service.
Thank you. And you said something about asset recovery. I mean, let me push you on that a little bit. With the For now, we know that the asset recovery work, they had a false start, and since then we've not heard about them. So, is the poor work of the asset recovery team a sign that we started failing in this fight already?
No, I wouldn't take it like that. That was just an aspect of the fight against corruption. So that task force, my understanding is
That was very crucial because if you don't
very.
recover, yeah,
Yeah, and it's strong indicator too that listen, people will come, the government will come after you. It's very easy, Dennis. If somebody has a property that can easily be valued at several $1 million, and this person has no holdings in the country, this person has no serious going concerns, businesses and investment, they don't, we can really just track their assets down. We can track their wealth. How much money do they have? Where do they earn this money? It's easy. We can track that down, and their salary, their income. So how come you have real estate that can easily be, it's worth more than your own net worth hundreds of times? How is that possible? You have to tell us the source of this money. And if you can, even if you engage in fraudulent activities, you try to, falsify documents and so on, it's very easy if we want to do it. But what bothers us is you hear this thing, we're a small country, everybody is related, you touch this person, you've touched that other person, somebody will come back in you, and then, and also who we put on these kinds of integrity institutions. Who are the people you recruit? If you recruit their people based on political alliances or based on political loyalty to you, now the professionals who will do the job because they are professionals, because they're hired to do, they have the skills, the experience, the expertise, and the objectivity to do the work, then you're setting it up to fail. And therefore, it will send this signal. It's not a perception, it's reality that, all right, this thing is not serious because look at these people. They don't know what they're doing. Now, somebody has used the law against them. The person now has an upper hand.
right. And that's why
So Dennis, let me make a quick point on an asset recovery thing.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question. If asset recovery, which is crucial, if you speaking like English, mango, you think you can get the rest of it right?
The asset recovery thing, Dennis, was never going to work. Never. When you want to start something, you have to start it with the proper foundation. We have institutions in the country that were responsible to do that job, established for time indefinite. Then you set up an ad hoc institution, you bring 25 persons on board, you put them in your office, and you say they are going to recover assets. Half of them have no expertise. And this asset recovery is not political research, it's auditing, it's forensic investigation, it's litigation, it's international affairs. So there was no way, but in Liberia, like I always joke, everybody is an expert. So you just put up an asset recovery, you take some people from on Facebook, you take some people from on your campaign team, you put them in your office, and you tell them to go and recover assets. There was no way, only in Liberia, because in Liberia, everything is politics. Everything. One of the best things that Mr. Boaka can do, if he really wants asset recovery, is to restructure, for example, the Justice Ministry, restructure the police, restructure the LSCC, so that they make very independent. Why is the police always on the side of the ruling party? Why does the Ministry of Justice always look and does nothing when the ruling party commit crime? We have to ask ourselves those fundamental questions. And unless we can remodel ourselves to give those institutions independence, like maybe the way we have the FBI here, or you have institutions that are credible. They have laws that give them the free hand to operate. Unless we do that, we're going to have problems. So an ad hoc committee, we're never going to do it. Then you staff it with Facebook activists, and then you put them in your office, in the executive mansion. Where you ever see anti-graft agency located in the executive mansion? So there was no way it was going to work.
Thank you. Let me finally ask this question to set this up so we can get into the current fight against corruption. Dr. Dukley, what are the signs that when you see that tell us we are winning or losing the fight against corruption? What are some of the signs?
The signs will be simple to see. I mean, you would know that people are not living extravagantly. People are doing their jobs, and the institutions are going after the public, money. I think these are things that you could see it. You live in the U.S. What do you know? You say, okay, the system works. Why does it work? Because whenever there's a bad guy somewhere, a bad girl, they'll catch you someday, and they'll bring you down to justice. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. So that's the problem we have. In Liberia, we celebrate rogues. We clap for rogues. We vote for them. We eat with them. We drink with them. And then we say we oppose corruption, and that's the whole point. That's where education comes in. That, how do you steal money from one branch of the government to go buy a seat in another branch of the government? And we still clap it. Everybody know 5 years ago, you didn't have a dime. But now you have millions. You have 3, 4 cars. You got 5, 6, residences. So people still embrace corruption as if the state money is the elephant meat. So as long as you're stealing from the elephant meat, you're not stealing. You can take your part. And as long as you share with some people around you, you're okay. So if those signs, so how do we get that out of our people? How do you remove that from the people's psyche? That's where education comes in. But hey, it's going to take a long time. Because people see the state's money as, elephant meat. Get your knife, cut your share it, and go on.
So how can we tell that we're winning the fight if we
Well,
if we get people in jail or if we close the holes?
Well, you won the fight when you don't have cases every day in the newspapers or people, just rumors circulating on theft or people getting too rich and then you see government running efficiently. Yes, that's when you win it. Or whenever there's a case, it goes to court. Whenever there's a case, it goes to court, and to the end of it, the guys with a girl who committed a crime goes to jail. So if you do that a few times, then people say, okay, you're really fighting. Not just for the people who you punish now, but also for people who are also working in the government to know that they're not above the law, and that they'll be caught and they'll be jailed.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Oh, Dennis, just a quick point on knowing how you won or how you know you win.
I will come to you.
There's a key point on a key statistics I just wanted to share with you.
Yeah, just hold that thought, Jimmy. Before Jimmy gets bold, Jimmy, let me hear your side. How do we know? What are the signs that we are winning the fight against corruption or we are losing? I mean,
very good.
To my enter in Douala.
Very good. I mean, I hear a lot of stuff, but if we remain theoretical, then we don't really solve the problem. Because any system, you're going to have people in that system, and it's the people that will cause the problem. Let me give you an example of Georgia. Georgia was a very corrupt state at one time. Very, very corrupt. They instituted certain measures that brought them from 155 on the list of corrupt places down to 51 of the lesser corrupt places. One thing they started doing is having high-profile prosecutions of corrupt officials. High profile. When you bring down a minister, a senator, a judge, anyone who has participated, when you prosecute them, you are winning. You are slowly discouraging the act of corruption because they realize now that they can get after and they could be incarcerated. And just like Attorney Freeman was talking, I mentioned the same thing. You have to punish. The other thing they did was to have some civil service reform. If you're not going to pay people salaries that they can live on, then you increase their reliance on bribery. I mean, let's be practical. Yes, y'all can't. The man can't eat. He can't feed his kids. He can't do. How will he survive? So you have to address the real issue. Another thing they have to. What we could do is when you have a simple bureaucracy. You don't have. You got to go pay this one. You got to pay this. All those. It just creates more opportunity for corruption. Make it simple so that business people, everybody can just go one place, get the permit, and go. Not giving everybody after no paper, no pen, no light bulb, all those kinds of opportunities. You make it simple, and then there will be no opportunities for bribery, and even police for reform. So you have they did what Georgia did. They disbanded the entire police force and rehired, and they had a very sensitive recruitment process so that they don't bring in people who will do the same. And of course, they increase the incentive by giving them more money so they wouldn't be prone to bribery. But we can't do these. We can't correct corruption until we remove the elements that encourage it. And as we've all noticed that for some reason or not, we hail people who have gotten rich. We don't really. I mean, poverty will do that to you. We don't really care how you got your money. You're rich. They're not worried about how you got
I'm hungry.
your money.
I want you to give me some. That's why.
Yes, they don't. They not care. They don't care. So there's no shame in it. That's why I say it's not going to be easy because right now people are condoned. But if we start shaming, when we start shaming ill-got money, it will have an effect on the psyche. So those are some practical things you have to do, but you cannot do it in absence of changing the environment that people find themselves.
And Tom, it's still the same question. How do we know we are winning or losing? Because like Jimmy was saying, most of the time we're only dealing with the symptoms of corruption. We are not going to the root cause, right? And so, for instance, somewhere I was reading, they said, well, discretionary power that we give to people can enable them to be corrupt. So for us to be able to discourage that is you don't give people all this discretionary power. So if you really look at corruption from the root, how can we tell that we are winning the fight or we are losing it? You can arrest 400 persons today from 10 years ago, but are you stopping another 300 from stealing today? How do we know we are losing or winning this fight, Tom?
So there are global institutions out there. I think Jimmy was mentioning how one country came from this point to that point. There are global institutions out there that do global surveys and rank countries. So the one way we know that we are making progress is if we change our position on these global indices, because they are trying to assess all the countries. So it's almost like the FIFA ranking. We say maybe Spain is number one, the other countries are number this, number that. Every time you win a match, it does reflect in your ranking. So the way Spain has won Euro, they might change one or two positions. And it is not a self-assessment. So therefore, we can't say, oh, Liberia is changing her position and increasing her score simply because she wants to show to her public that she's doing well. This is some institution that is outside our terrain that is doing that. And every time these reports come out, people discredit it and say, oh, these are perceptions, because the international the Transparency International, for instance, the way they do the work is that they go out there and they interview the public over the past 3 months, over the past 6 months, over the past 1 year. Did you pay a bribe to anyone? And then people will say yes, because people go to hospital, they have to pay bribe. People go to the police station, they have to pay bribe. People go even to pay taxes. You are going to pay tax, and somebody wants you to bribe them before you pay the tax to the government. So when it is very widespread, if you talk to out of 10 persons, over 6 or 7 persons are going to tell you, oh yes, I did it. The other day the police arrested me, I had to pay money. So that then gets interpreted and it gets calculated into the ranking, into your position on the index that comes up. So how do we know we are making progress? We can know domestically in terms of prosecutions, for instance. How many cases has the LACC prosecuted this year compared to last year? How many cases have they won this year compared to last year? How much asset have they been able to recover compared to last year? So domestically, we can develop. We have systems in place to be able to tell us we are making progress. And if that is positive, then it will also reflect on the international front in terms of how we are compared to other countries. Because if you look at that ranking, it will tell you the most corrupt country in the world and the least corrupt countries in the world. But overall, like we are saying, I think it is the framework, that broader framework, like you are talking about strategy. How can the LACC, the RAA, the LMP, and all of them, they are in the same sector. They were meant to promote transparency and accountability. How can they all come together and put a sector strategy together on how we are going to address the issue of corruption moving forward? You have the Information Commission. All of these institutions should put in place so that when you do something and the public want information on why you did, they can go and file an information request and it will be provided to them. I just think instead of all of them working independently, can they come together and put a strategy together to see how we move this forward? But on the fundamental question of how do we see we are making progress, there is international statistics we can look at. There are domestic data that we can look at, if even it is being collected. Because some of these institutions are running and they are not collecting data. But LACC, for instance, is doing well. On asset declaration, for instance, they just reported today how many persons filed declaration, how many persons from the legislature, and all of that. So these data points can tell us whether we're making progress or not.
Yeah, so Dennis, I just want to follow up because I wanted to bring up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I did a comparative analysis between Singapore and Liberia, which is on my blog. And I just wanted to, quote some of the statistics. So I was comparing the Singapore Anti-Corruption Commission, which they call then the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, and the LACC, and the year under investigation was 2021. So during that 2021 year, Singapore Anti-Investigation Commission did 470 investigations compared to LACC 38. And they prosecuted 152 cases compared to LACC 1. And their conviction rate was 98% compared to LACC 0. And that Singapore Anti-Graft Bureau is headed by one director. And LACC is headed by 7 commissioners. So part of the problem we have in Liberia, we design our institution for it not to work. It is designed. Either we design it not to work or we staff it not to work. For example, we wrote a asset disclosure law and we put no punishment for lying, for refusing to do it, for not declaring, no punishment. So as it stands, 70% of the officials don't bother to declare because obviously there's no punishment. Okay? So you staff the LACC, you put 7 commissioners there, they consume all the resources for investigation, and you don't have investigators, you don't have lawyers. Because the big guys are 7, and by the time they divide the money on the 7 of them, the money is finished, there's no money for investigation. You understand me? So we have to restructure our institution so that they are effective and they are functional, because it works in other countries. We see the statistics, but when you come to Liberia, it is designed not to work. And we have to get away with that. And some of those things, the same way Barker could have just done an executive order, whatever, he could do an executive order to fast track some of these things. but he's not just prepared for it. Because, like I said, some of the people who are committing crimes today are right in your office.
Thank you. Tom, you were talking about the corruption index, so I just tried to put that on the screen.
Yes, that's it. So when you move on this, then we can know that you're making progress.
Let me go to Dr. Williams. How can we
Yeah,
tell that we are losing the fight
how can we
or winning
tell?
it?
Before I go to how can we tell, let me go back to Thomas's point. I don't think amalgamating all of these integrated institutions is going to help. Separate, they can work separately, but also integrate their strategy. They can have a national strategy around which all of them work, so that each is basically checking the other, just as we have the branches. I think it's set up right, separate, but their work can also be integrated because they more or less interact and follow up on the actions of the others in terms of the execution of their job. Uh, Let me say I'm not a great believer in global statistics. I am a proponent of localized, customized solutions to our problems. I'm not a believer in many of the global stats that we see around. And so, for me, for to appreciate a government is making frantic and objective efforts, and to use your words that we are winning, I like to see government approach both the supply end of corruption, yeah, closing those loopholes, putting in systems, reducing waste in public service, yeah. Once we have a concerted effort in those areas, closing the gap, putting in adequate systems, making sure before people come into government, they are cleared of integrity, clear of financial crimes, clear of everything. Today, too many people are in government with red flags. Too many people. The quality of people we even put to head these institutions, I think Ahmed alluded to that. The asset recovery team. You appoint the former head of the LACC. You're basically rivaling the asset recovery and the LACC as one who has headed that institution before, as if there weren't enough people around. And so targeting the supply side is critical, and that will require serious leadership, instituting responsive systems to address those loopholes. Then there's the issue of the demand side, and I think it was Mr. Eastman who alluded to that. You cannot expect people to go home hungry and see their leaders packing the back of their cars, taking out monies, and signing all these big checks. And so you need to close that gap. Close the gap. Reduce desperation and poverty by paying people appreciable wages so that they go home and they're responsible to their families. Like they say, when Papa come home, Papa won't come home with a bag in his hand, not swinging his hand. And so supply and demand side is important to address, but more crucially, in a transition like we have today, we were all excited when Madam Salif came over. You know, she made all the great promises because, in all fairness, those were our expectations of Madam Salif. Worked at UNDP, former Minister of Finance, former President of LBDI. We knew she had the wherewithal. More than that, she was maybe President Obama's greatest adversary in terms of some of the social and political abuses of his days. And so coming into government, the expectations were pretty high. She failed miserably in that regard. Yes, she set up the institutions, like someone says. It was more checking the boxes for international partners. And so more money came in. But a lot of the institutions suffered because as much as she knew, in terms of her experience, those experiences did not manifest in the manner and form that we expected that corruption would have been fought. And so she failed. And that failure was manifested by the ushering into government of Mr. Weir. For those who didn't know Mr. or who knew Mr. Weir, I had very little expectation of his abilities to curb corruption in any form. I serve at the LFA. There are records there. There's a lot of information there to show and show otherwise. That this man was capable of doing for Liberia what couldn't have happened at the LFA. And so I think in this government, in this time, 6 months again is way, way, way too soon to begin to determine whether or not we're succeeding because it's just starting. I'm not sure there's a national strategy. If there is, I haven't heard of it, but we will hope that within the next 6 months, a national strategy to curb corruption that will include things like an integrity audit for people coming into government, so that the president, the pressure placed on the government, on the president to decide or to know who's coming into government, because a lot of those people he's appointing, he does not know.
Let me ask Mr. Williams one question, if you don't mind, Jenner. I want to. We saw what the asset recovery team was concocted, who it composed of. One would think that the people who are coming up with ideas and advising, they have really not enough rudimentary knowledge to put together a team. Now, I like your proposal, but from the examples I see this administration doing in the early stage, do you think they have the wherewithal to put something like that together?
Again, the onus is on President Boycott. The onus is on him. It is his government. I continue to maintain that any president who fails because he wants to fail. Liberia has manpower. We have people around the world, not just at home. Mrs. Salif showed to Liberia that you can bring the brightest and the best, and she did. Now, did she follow that up with the commitment to fight corruption? No, absolutely no. But she brought in the brightest and the brightest. Mr. Booker was vice president. He is now president. I refuse to believe that Mr. Boycott has no understanding after almost 40 years in government, don't have the network to bring in the people. We can't just keep appointing people to sit in public offices to do the same thing that was done for 30, 40 years ago. Look at most of our ministries. They're doing the same things. Very few examples of innovation taking place right now. And so how long do those people have to stay in government? If there's no innovation, why are they there? What's new? And so it's a function of who you bring around you.
Dennis, can you give me 10 seconds?
Yeah, hold on. And I want us to go to the Boycott fight against corruption. Already, because when you are fighting against corruption, people should trust the fight, right? They should. Already, the former president had brought up a litany of charges against President Boycott's fight against corruption. He talked about the unlawful detention without grand jury, harassment and removal of civil servants based on political affiliation, excessive use of force against citizens leading to death, non-prosecution of election-related death, or disregard to tenure laws despite Supreme Court ruling, violation of procurement laws for the yellow machines and the 22 million rehab roll, disgraceful treatment and denial of benefits to foreign service, suspension of the central bank governor, and on and on and on and on. So let's take a look at Boycott's fight against corruption. And what is your assessment of that? Because when I was asking you this question earlier, I was setting you up for this one so that we can use what we've just said to assess Boycott's fight against corruption. Let me start with you, Tom. You can make your 30 seconds and then go to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Dr. Williams. My point was not that the institution should be integrated into one institution. What I'm saying is that they should integrate their efforts into a national strategy, because it happens with all of the sectors. Even the agriculture sector, we have the National Development Plan, but the FDA, agriculture, based on the sector that you are in, you have to come up with a sector strategy. If there's a sector strategy, then they can be able to collaborate. But in many instances, the coordination among them take a lot of time. They have to request. It's like they are working independently. I just wanted to say that. But Dennis, to your question on the present, I think we see some effort. We can say, okay, the Asset Recovery Committee, the way it was constituted, it wasn't constituted well. And I'm not only saying this, some of the members that were there left and called on the president to reconstitute the Asset Recovery Committee or team. We have heard from former Auditor General Joe Molu. He has criticized the way they were constituted. And I think we had a previous show, for instance, we talk about it. I had problem with the way it was constituted with representation, youth representative, women representative, marketers representative. I don't really understand why this was it based on representation or it was based on competence and qualification that were placed on those things. But yet we cannot, also pay a blind eye to the point that it has been constituted. They've started doing some work. They made some mistakes. Now they are in court, but yet the president had taken action to be able to put that into motion, right? Now we have seen, for instance, former officials being indicted, not on the new audits that have been commissioned. Like you had a separate show on this issue with the former finance minister. This was something that was done by the LACC because of a tip-off that they had. And let me also say that we are making some bit of progress that we need to highlight. For instance, our LACC did not have a direct prosecutorial power. And development agencies and civil society organizations all through Madam Salih's time were advocating for this LACC to get prosecutorial power.
But not to interrupt, but what good is the prosecutorial power if you're not using it? I don't know if you prosecute anybody.
No. One second. Sometimes we are not following these things. The current LACC, for instance, they have gone to court with folks from the Planned Parenthood Association. They have indicted people with the way they misuse the phone. They are investigating this issue that took place in Magibi with the USAID funds. So they have been a little bit active. My point I wanted to make was that they did not have direct prosecutorial power before. So everything that happened, they had to go to the Justice Ministry. And people advocated for them to get direct prosecutorial power. When the former LACC boss happened to have gone to the Ministry of Agriculture and he was investigating people at the Water and Sewer Commission. You remember that retreat that took place in Ganta when they humiliated him. In response to that, the previous administration went back to an old law that was already drafted to say, okay, LACC should get prosecutorial power. They went ahead and passed that law. So it gave them that power. Now they have the power. They can no longer give us an excuse that they cannot go to court. I agree with the increase in the number of commissioners that they had. They also put some provisions in there that are very counterproductive. For instance, they said that nobody can be arrested by the LACC until the person is at flight risk. That means the person wants to escape from the country. So that I'm saying the president has started to take this action, regardless of the limitations that they have. We have started to see him take action. My point is that there are laws in place now that should help him to be able to do exactly what he wants to do. The Whistleblower Act has been passed. A lot of the other institutions or legal framework has already been done. So I think the president should just continue what he has started to really see that these kind of investigations that are going to court, the LACC can win it. Because if they can't win it, then it will be counterproductive. Anytime they have another case, everybody will say that Vlad. But they have to make sure that those things that they want to take to court, they have evidence enough to be able to get to the point of indictment, and they can even get to the point of recovering the assets.
Anthony Freeman, how do you assess President Bouakar's fight against corruption?
Okay, yeah, just before I go in there, let me just make it clear that prosecutorial power has never been a problem for the LACC. LACC has 90 days to allow the Ministry of Justice to operate. When the Ministry of Justice declines, LACC can go on her own. And that happened in the case of Mona Sie. We have forwarded the case to Ministry of Justice, and Ministry of Justice, because of Mona Sie political position or whatever, they were reluctant. When they declined after 90 days, LACC on her own went after Mona Sie and convicted her. So there was never a problem with prosecutorial power. Now, to the Bouakar thing, the elementary principle of law is that when you come to equity, you must come with clean hands. So if Mr. Bouakar is leading the charge of violating the laws, leading the charge of stealing from the country, nobody is ever going to believe that he can pursue corruption. For example, Mr. Bwaka wrote an incriminating letter to the legislator and told them that he was bringing multi-million-dollar equipment on a gentleman agreement. Have you ever heard that in any country, in a serious country, he would have been impeached, arrested, and prosecuted like they did in South Korea or like they did in Brazil? But you know, Lebanon is a country we just joke. A president who's supposed to run the country according to the Constitution tell you he's operating with gentleman agreement, bringing in multi-million-dollar equipment, and you say he's serious? That was the $21 million that Public Works said they didn't follow the law. They themselves admitted that they never followed the law. The job of the legislature was to forward them to the Ministry of Justice to see if a crime was committed. They didn't do that. They said they forgave. But under the Liberian Constitution, the legislature has no power to forgive. And even the president's power to forgive is limited only after a conviction. So, if Bwaka is going to be stealing, and he's going to encourage his officials to steal, and he himself is going to lead a charge of violating the laws, it's going to be difficult for anybody to take him seriously. Even the case, the celebrated case now, with the Ministry of Finance, that should have been by way of an indictment. That would be the more professional way to do it. Because when you go to the magisterial court, you just say something with your mouth and they write it down and they go after people. But when you go by way of indictment, you will document all the evidence, submit it to, it will be pre-tested by what we call the grand jury before they will allow you to proceed. But I don't think they were prepared to wait for all that procedure because they needed to score some political points. So they just went to the magistrate and said, hurry up, write this thing quick. We need to catch some people and put them in jail so that we can score political points. The issue about justice is not about political points. It is about making sure that the rule of law prevails. And if Bwaka is going to be stealing, encouraging and harboring people who are stealing, nobody is going to take his anti-corruption fight seriously.
Thank you. Dr. Dugley, I don't know if that's a smile or why it is, but let's look at President Bwaka's fight against corruption. You know, already people are saying, hey, I mean, you are going back 2 years, 3 years ago to prosecute people. What's about now? What's about the things that are happening now? What do you make of the fight against corruption? But he's doing something because we got to start from somewhere. What's your take?
Well, I'll say, you have to start from somewhere. And he started with auditing he took over from a government, and the mistakes that were made, I don't think he wants to do that. We are say, oh, I'm not going to audit the Unity Party government, and moved on. Maybe that allowed him to do what he wanted to do, but I think Bwaka is not trying to do that. He's trying to audit the government institution by institution to know where they are. And if they find that somebody has taken money or somebody has acted corruptly, well, in that process, yes, he's doing that. And I think that's, that's a good beginning. As far as I say, but he's acting, he's stealing money. We don't have proof of that yet. $22 million, the machines, I think that, from the beginning, I say machines were like,
But just a point, you got to investigate to have the proof. Just a point, you got to investigate. Why don't they allow the Ministry of Justice to investigate the $21 million deal? Why don't they allow the Ministry of Justice to investigate the F-moving equipment deal? Investigate, then you will know the truth.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, what are you saying here is you are asking the government to investigate itself.
Why not?
Why not ask the legislature to do it? Because it's their job. Because they went to the legislature, they say, oh, we don't have any document about any machines. But the machines are in the custody of the government because they're supposedly being kept at BTC. So there's something not right, and I think that, maybe Bwaka may have made a big mistake trying to cover up for his advisors. Sometimes people do that. I think that's what happened, and I think somebody was trying to run a hustle. It didn't go well, and Bwaka probably just took the say, okay, I'm going to write a letter because that letter doesn't make sense at all. I agree with you. You don't say, oh, I know somebody who's going to give me 285 machines to work on our roads, and we don't know that guy, we don't know that person, we don't know where the machines are coming from, we don't know anything about it. So definitely somebody was hustling. It was a hustle, and he fell in a trap and then tried to save that person by committing himself. Sort of say the buck starts with me, but still the case is still there. But I think he's okay. I mean, I don't have any problem with him going after anybody who took money somewhere. I mean, if you found a person today, take him. If you find a person from yesterday stealing it, take the person. Whenever you find somebody who stole sometime in the past, the mistakes of today cannot justify the bad actions of yesterday. You can't say, oh, yeah, something bad happened today, so therefore let's forget about what happened yesterday. Maybe what happened yesterday was the basis for what's happening today. The institutions were so broken down that nobody could get anything done. But before I finish up, Councillor, the prof, we are talking about the same old thing about corruption. I was there. Some of us are still alive, thank God. That issue came up because somebody from Taylor's side, somebody very close to him, wanted to break away and come to IGNU. And we would do everything, anything, any chance we had to bring somebody from Ganta, we'll do it. From Banga, either students, a fighter, anybody. We'll give you a house, we'll give you a car, as long as you're breaking away from Taylor. And in that context, people came and they complained, say, oh, the man is so corrupt. He and Taylor were in business, da 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 da. Amos said, today our priority is peace. If he's moving away from Taylor, make a bridge in the NPFL that we can use, let him come. And that's what happened. And then when Tom Kamara left the IGNU, in his first article against IGNU, he wrote up to say, Amos prefer to take over, corruption over, whatever is a peace. That's what happened. He was about somebody joining IGNU, and he didn't say we prefer corruption. He said, I don't care today, our priority is peace. So let him come. So that was the context.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's look at the suspension of the central bank governor.
Yeah.
And we have a attorney here who can say that according to the central bank, according to the act, right, it shouldn't be the president doing that. So when they find the president doing these things, if it is not by the law, they feel that he's witch hunting in the fight against corruption. Well, the other report says something, and why don't we go through the process of getting him out or getting him in jail?
I think. You
wanted me to speak?
No, let Dr. Dukla continue.
Okay.
I think that a lot of mistakes are being made. I'm not sure if you could say, oh, government is new, but after 6 months and then 12 years of experience in the government are close to the presidency, I don't think, Boca should be making these kind of mistakes. I'm not sure what the statutes say in the about this governor, but these issues keep coming up. Every time they take an action, there's something in the Constitution that says no, that says the contrary. So maybe sometimes people are trying to hurry up to show that they're working. I don't think that's a good beginning. That, definitely that's what I would say to that. I don't know what the problem is with the governor. I don't know what the statutes are, who's supposed to suspend him or her. But if Boca did and he is not supposed to do it, then therefore there's a problem.
Let me come in before Mr. Freeman, please. Yeah, because Mr. Freeman had a lawyer. Dr. Dukla just echoed what I said before. There are mistakes being made. And one thing, because I'm noticing a pattern of these mistakes, okay, the appointment of those that what they call them, asset recovery, you have a audit, you don't charge the governor or anything, and you're ready to remove him. Why did you go through the process? I'm seeing repetitive mistakes, and that it means the person who is handling these things is not competent enough to be doing it. and President Buckeye is going to have to reckon with that, because it should not be making these elementary mistakes for any kind of governance in the country. They're elementary. They're not complicated. Why are you getting all entangled in this thing like this at this early stage? And it seemed to be trivial mistakes. So definitely,
what does that have to do with the fight against corruption? Does it?
Huh? What does that have to do with?
The fight against corruption. That's what we're talking today.
Well, okay, if they try to do asset recovery, that is a direct fight against corruption, and it was a debacle. Okay, they trying to prosecute somebody who might have misused government funds, but they're going about it in the wrong way, so you lose the case. You cannot go outside the law or circumvent your law or break the law to enforce the law. You cannot do that. And I'm not a law student, but I can't understand the logic of breaking the law to enforce the law. Somebody's not competent, and that person has to be removed.
Let reference that. I think this is what many are referring to. The executive governor, non-executive governor, or deputy governor shall be removed by the Senate from office only upon a bill of impeachment by the House of Representatives upon any of the following reasons: gross breach of duty, misconduct in office, conviction of a felony, being declared bankrupt, disqualified or suspended from practicing his profession in Liberia by order of a competent authority made in respect of him personally, and is adjudged or otherwise declared to be a person of unsound mind or incapable of properly performing the functions of the office owing to ill health. Is there anywhere else we can look to see? Because this one, he was suspended.
Well, the Supreme Court has always held that removal is removal, whether you do suspension or whatever you do. If you remove the person temporarily, permanently, is removal. That they have Supreme Court opinion on that. But what I want to say, there are two aspects to legality. There is the substantive law, and there is the procedural law. And you cannot do one without the other. All two must be done together. So it is true that there was an audit, but what you do with an audit, you forward that audit to the Ministry of Justice, to the police, to the LSCC. Then they will investigate and recommend charges. And then the Ministry of Justice or LSCC, whoever, when they file those charges, then you use those charges to suspend the governor or whatever, and then you pursue the matter through the legal process. Because now if he is indicted, he cannot be head of the central bank. But, I mean, this guy was said to have all this experience, but you can see, you know what it means for a president to tell you that he signed a gentleman agreement for more than $80 million? So, you know, I mean, it's just, he got a legal advisor in the executive mansion. Then he has the Minister of Justice. All he has to do, ask for a legal opinion. Then they will write a legal opinion to him. This is the way you proceed. So you gotta ask the political people what's happening, because as far as I'm concerned, he has all the legal means to do what is right. He's just operating politically. So it's more like a political question to me.
Thank you. And our good friend Sam Wallace said you are confusing unorthodox to mistake, Jimmy, because President Walker is doing unorthodox things. That's not mistakes.
Well, he's supposed to use the Constitution. And he's supposed to use the laws of Liberia. That's why he's supposed to use. And the central bank law is one of the laws that he's supposed to use.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Tough Talking Thursday. We are discussing the fight against corruption. My last question will be for you to compare. Let's run a broad sweep through President Salif, President Weah, and now President Boakai. How has this fight been, if you want to compare it? And listeners, if you want to join this, please call 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. I mean, it will be just 6 months of President Bouakai compared to 12 years of Ellen or 12-year President Salif and 6 years of President Weah. But
I
what
think
do you see some commonalities? Do you see stark differences? Do you see the same strategy? What do you see, Dr. Dukley, when you kind of run a line through all three of them?
I was going to say that maybe you don't want to compare the three, but just two, Salif and Weah, because Bokak would turn around tomorrow and say, okay,
Right. So,
whatever we did in the last 6 months, forget about it. I'm taking a new course. And then for the next 5 years, you have a new Bokak. So really 6 months, and with the, as Jimmy said, those little, petty mistakes that sort of seem to cloud everybody's judgment about him.
orthodox or mistakes?
Yeah, unorthodox mistakes, whatever you call them, but the word is still mistake. So beyond that, I would say, you want to compare probably Sirleaf to, Where, and see how the two, because the two completed the terms and
What do
then
you think?
met, and then,
Yeah, compare the two and see which one President Bouakai, which one when
yeah,
President Bouakai start walking, which direction is he going compared to two of them?
well, I would say Buakai, to compare, if you were to, I would say probably more towards Sirleaf, the institutions. Maybe he will try to strengthen the institutions down the line. I hope he will, but I don't see him. You can weaken them more than they were when they were. There's no way, no way you can, unless you shut them down. So you can only go upward. So I would say if you get the institution to +1 from the -5 where we are now to get +1, maybe that would be a success. Then we'll be going in the
But
direction of Sylvia's first term, her first term, as she was really gung ho on corruption, creating institutions, bringing people on board, no matter what political institution they came from.
Dr. Williams, let's run a straight line. Let's run line through the three. You can excuse
Like,
President Bouakai, but at least which direction?
like Dr. Dukley has just said, President Barker would be the odd factor, the odd element in the measurement of the three. There's not much data to measure him on. And so it would be unfair to bring him in the equation. As far as President Sirleaf and President Weah, I would conservatively say that President Weah record on corruption was solidified based on the records of President Sirleaf. Her inactions emboldened Mr. Weah to have recorded a level of corruption during his 6 years. Had she honestly undertaken strong measures to ensure that corruption was nipped in the bud, not just from family participants who were outside of government, but even those who were inside of government as well, were actively involved in the process. Her son, her sister, family members were there, actively involved in the process, and as such, there was no teeth to bite. There was no teeth to bite, and I would say Mr. Weah's incompetence was further, his fight against corruption was fed and informed by those lapses of Mr. Sirleaf. And so he did quite more than probably she did. And so we're hoping.
I was going to ask you, but where came in his speech, opening, in the overall speech, said that anybody who steals government money, they go after you, da 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 da. He spent a whole 3 or 4 minutes talking about how he's going to fight corruption. So why should we blame Sirleaf? So why should we blame Sirleaf for him not doing it?
Mr. said the same thing.
Yeah, but okay, you blame her for her work, and then you don't blame her for what Weah did.
Well, I'll say this much. Mr. Weah became president based on President Sirleaf's support and the need to protect herself.
Yes.
in the post-Salif regime. And so that is clear. We're not going to argue about that. She brought in Mr. Weah to protect herself. And what was she protecting? Her corruption record. With family, her son at NOCAL, the sister operating in the backgrounds and controlling ministries and agencies, family members everywhere. That was clear. Liberia is a small country.
How do you say that was clear? We're not going to argue that. What are you basing this on?
No, oftentimes, Dennis, our intent, again, Liberia is a small country. We tend to protect those that sit as our model. Okay? And I can understand why Mr. Duper will make the comment he's making. I, as a little boy, have followed Mrs. Salif from 1985, when I didn't know who she was, to 2006 at her inauguration. I believed in her. All right? Post, by the time second term was on, I did not. Because then our eyes were open to some of the things, some of the very things she took on the top of the board, went into it. And when she brought in Mr. Weah and empowered Mr. Weah did what he did.
How did she do that?
I mean, she did not vote. She didn't vote for
Mr. Weah
Weah.
president over Mr. Boycott.
Did she make Liberian people vote for Weah?
She influenced the election of Mr. Weah to the presidency.
All right, we can spend another show to talk about that.
Okay,
yeah.
That's
but
okay.
Mr. Weah and his henchmen were emboldened. His henchmen were emboldened by the connection and his support from Mrs. Salif. That's why he kept in his government some of Mrs. Salif's proteges, who were some of them were his friends, but he kept them in up until the end of his 6 years. They're still friends. And so this is clear. This is clear. Come to Mr. Boycott. He too probably lost out on the previous election based on his commitment to audit Mrs. Salif. Mrs. Salif.
Allow me to come in 1 minute. I respect Dr. Williams' opinion, and I've heard this argument before. But let me remind us. In 2005, Weah was, or the events leading up to Weah was the most popular candidate. They had a gang up group against him to defeat him. Every single time he's run, they've always had to gang up against him. So finally, in 2016 or 2017, it had crested after trying several times. So he had his own momentum and his own popularity. What President Salif might have done would capitalize on that and usher him in by assisting him financially, whatever way she could. But he already had the momentum and that popularity way before any involvement with President
I wouldn't argue that. I wouldn't argue that.
But Jimmy, 2005, not all party gangs against him. In fact, 17 of the other parties went to Weah because they all thought he was going to win. Everybody, Bromskin sat on the fence, but Tipote and then Burma family came with Ellen, but the rest of them, all of them went to Mr. Weah at the time. 17.
Thank you.
Okay. We were there.
Thank you. Well, I want to.
Dennis, can I make a point?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if we have callers here. Callers, if you want to join, please, I'll call the number on the line. Yeah, Tom, I want you to run a line through that. It's the little chick that will turn to rooster who can spot it. That the one that can climb on the man back.
Yeah.
So even though Sigma is too short, but we can tell where he's going with this.
Yeah, I mean the current administration, like you say, but I was mostly going to go the line Dr. Williams went. That there's a very strong link between the George Weah attitude towards corruption to Madam Salif. I'm happy that Dr. Duke tried to clarify when Jimmy was speaking that he was already popular in all of that. 2005 record doesn't show that. Okay. Then the question is, why was he even more popular in 2017? Because Madam Salif failed in her second term. She basically made George Weah president by her dismal performance in her second term. Why was he popular? If you had raised the bar of governance to a level where the Liberian people were not going to think about a removing Unity Party, George Weah was never going to be in contention. But much of the work that she did, all of the caliber of people that she brought, and even the caliber of people that she managed to bring in the country was because of donor initiatives. At that time, UNDP had a Stoking initiative where countries that went through civil war, whether it was Iraq and other countries, they would go in the diaspora and get your expertise and bring it back. Some of the people were even paid by donor agencies under the SES, the Senior Executive Service Program. So she had all of those benefits. She had the people. This is why if you go back to our post-war or administration and regime, much of the policy work that was done in Liberia, whether it was the National Energy Plan, the anti-corruption strategy, all of that, it was done in her first term. But again, the mistake that she made was that some of the critical reforms that other countries take immediately after the Civil War, she postponed them to her second term. Whether it was land reform, it was decentralization, public sector reform, she postponed it to her second term when she was no longer serious to be president, when Rabo Seli was the actual president. So I think she made Weah president. And then Weah comes, go back to Akara's great post in 2017 and say Weah is a patriot. Weah is going to protect Madam Seli and her children and her family. And that's exactly what they did. And President Weah says, I want to promote peace, and therefore I'm not going to prosecute anybody. But in the words of the previous National Independence Day orator, that was negative peace. Peace in the sense that other people got rich, the rest of the population is getting poor. It's not positive peace. It's not making this country peaceful to fail to prosecute. So like I said, in the 6 months, if President Bouaka has started to take action, like we have all said, he has made some mistakes. But if he can move this forward, then he will be distinguishing himself from the 2 previous administrations. But I think President Weah not different from Manaseli.
But Tom, to be fair to Weah did not remove 10 people. Weah did not remove bank governor. Weah set up asset recovery just like Bouaka did. So you see some of these things. So and Weah did not. Right now, President Bouaka is being accused of cherry picking because there are other corruption things on his lap, and he's leaving that and going to 2017.
And that's why Manaseli made Weah president. Because right now you can't leave Weah and go join all the way to 2006, 2007. Why don't you deal with what is before you? So right now she's out of the picture. Before they get to her, probably I don't know what will happen. That's why she made Weah president. So she is the beneficiary of everything that has taken place. Mortgage the country. When she can you imagine, even when Unity Party was launching a campaign in 2017, she would go to her farm. She had no time. Your party, you the sitting president. So, I mean, all of them have similarities. When she came, she prosecuted the interim government. Julia came, put some people in handcuffs. And I look at him these past days when he came back to the country, he went to the grave of the former son of Charles. The man he had in handcuffs. He said, "Oh, I went to his grave because I was not here when he died. He's my best friend." He's your best friend. You put him in Orange Johnson and sent him to prison.
So when people start for the names, they remember that, right? That is this the Tue, the Jefferson Camo, and all that. Will it be another Charles Salif scenario? Well, let me bring in one of our callers here. We have callers on the line. Eric Jensen, you are live. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Jack, for giving me the opportunity. I think I'm following this discussion closely, and lastly, Dr. William, I think, make a point there, which I think sparked up the conversation about giving support to George Weah to have a and I think it's quite correct. And one of the key issues was that to the point where in Bon County around 2017, where the groundbreaking took place for the rule connection to you had a black person who was running, but she did that groundbreaking alongside with the opposition presidential candidate at the time, George Weah. You can check the Front Page Africa edition of that particular publication. I think that was indirectly. You know, JP supposed to, George Weah, because that was the campaign at the second round of 2017. You didn't go with a vice president who was in the race, but rather the opposition candidate, he took long to do a groundbreaking ceremony, which was a major project that could even serve him or any other opposition figures at that time. And looking at the other, group of guys who split at the time from the Unity Party that crossed over to partially to CDC, you know, like I think the current American and some other guys, it was a crossover because everything at the time was battled by some of our group with internal fight. But in any given situation, of course, I would like to agree with Dr. Williams partially that I think George Weah was actually supported so that his cause, the mission could be protected.
So what you make of the fight against corruption?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let's go there.
He totally performed the fact that from the onset, that was the era he failed. One, he did not go ahead to audit the Ellen government, grading Ellen 80%. That was just a major. You didn't do audit on what the youngsters used. How did you derive at the 80% performance of Ellen government? I find it difficult to understand for any other angle that you agree somebody with all you having, or kind of evaluation or any kind of benchmark that you set.
Thank you.
And you start that. So he currently, George Weah, as the outgoing president, we actually not complaining. He's not witch hunting. I'm sure if he gets, talk to his guys, listen to the audit procedures, follow the whole guideline, he will get 95% because Ellen got 80. I think we have only evaluation taking place with clear benchmark with all the anti-graft of that's a group working along. And if you can't work successfully, be clear of all major audit or indictment or so, I think you'll get 95%. We should be in better. If you didn't want to go for 2029, it will set in on the rightful path. So I think this shouldn't be something I can run around with. So I don't want to make sure that I make my point for that. Thank you, Dennis, and other colleagues.
Thank you. Gentlemen, my last question is, where do we go from here? We always want to close on that note. On the fight against corruption, what are your recommendations? What do we do? What needs to happen? Especially with President Boakai, who is right now on the steering.
JP recommendation, send the people to jail.
Anthony Freeman said, gotta jail them. We have other colors that hang up. So
well, I can go.
You start.
Okay, my recommendation is simple. Strengthen the institutions. I don't think there's a need for asset recovery ad hoc group. Whatever they do can be done by the LSCC. Give LSCC all the money they need to investigate, to get forensic audit and all of that, and strengthen GAC. Let them do their work and let the chips for what they may, and then that's all you can do. And make sure you have the right people at the right place. But they're not all political, because I know the current leader of GAC was selected through a competitive competition. In fact, his deputy now came second to him in the competition to choose him, and then I think there were like more than 20 applicants. So it's now all political, and that was done on the way. I'll stop right there.
Let me throw some fire under that wood for what Dr. Dukley just laid. We cannot develop a nation without institutions. It's the institutions that carry out the legacy when we are long gone. They will encourage our children's children. We have to use institutional building of the country and development. So when Dr. Duke talks about we have to reinforce our institution, because that is what is going to carry out the legacy. That is what's going to last forever. These individual efforts they fizz out. They're gone. But when you have an upright institution that is perpetual. And after we've been through wars, we've been through a whole lot of things, our institutions were destroyed. Now, that's one of the only thing I would give it to Ellen Johnson. She tried to resuscitate those institutions. Now, subsequent administration supposed to continue this building of the institutions. Okay, I didn't see much of that. I saw some of it, but I didn't see enough of it in the last administration. Now, what Buckeye has to do, he has to focus on making, when we say the institution, the agriculture, the industry, the commerce institute, all these things that embody our laws and our aspirations, we have to make them stronger, because that will carry out the task ahead of us, not individuals. So yes, we have to, and this fight against corruption, the institutions that use it, the LACC, wherever these institutions are, you empower them. You give them the strength. You give them the support. The other day, I saw an op in the newspaper where the president of the Lawyers Association say you're going to have a judicial problem because you're not funding them. And this is the president of the lawyer administration, Rennie, Sylvester Rennie. He made that comment. As a matter of fact, I thought it was bold because he is also from LOFA. So we do have people, we do have their ability. So let's build our institution, invest in the institution, and they will do the work, not us individually.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman.
Okay, there are two aspects to legality. There is the substantive law and there is the procedural law. And for legality to occur, all two has to work in tandem. You can say, oh, this guy, he committed fraud, so we will break the law in order to go after him. No, once you break the procedural law, you break all the laws. You break the substantive law, you break all the laws. The other thing is, justice has to be seen and fair. Mr. Weir's perception of justice was to go after UP partisan. The 6 years he spent in power, the only people he ever went after were UP partisan. We said that was not good. We brought in Mr. Bwaka. Now Mr. Bwaka is going only after CDC partisan. And that's not a country you're running. If the justice is like one eye closed, one eye open, you know, it's closed when it's a CDC committing, I mean, it's open when CDC commit crime, then it's closed when UP commits crime. For example, in the US, you have the Department of Justice, you have the FBI. They just convicted a Democratic senator, Bernardes, and the same people prosecuted Trump. So they don't see justice is blind, whether you're Republican or you are Democrat. So Mr. Bwaka will not leave Biata Famule, who wasted $650,000, the chairman of his party that blew up $365,000, his public works minister blew up 21 million. He himself got his son and 2 ministers for his office to go to South Africa to carry on illegality. So for justice to be seen as prevailing, it has to be even-handed. When you people commit crime, you have to grab them. When CDC people commit crime, you have to grab them. When independent people commit crime, you have to grab them. But the justice that only sees CDC wrongdoing, it means we are not yet ready for justice. For us to know if it's serious, the UP people who commit crime, 2 of them right in Mr. Bwaka's office. He has to charge them and forward them for prosecution. That's how we know he's serious. We will not know he's serious just by going after CDC people. People will charge him for being biased. People will charge him for witch hunting. He has to be balanced. I'll end on that note.
Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Yes, sir. Thanks again for the invite. I think this has been an informative evening. I leave here in terms of what next is to call on the Burka government to just not necessarily stop what they're doing, but rethink. To borrow the words of our previous National Day orator, there needs to be some radical changes taking place. Radical institutions of whether it's executive orders or new laws, but we need to hear a few executive orders come into force to address some of the gaps while he worked to strengthening the laws in other areas. But a few executive orders have to come in. A lot of the graft that has taken place, money's being over the counter, the magnitude and the size of those amounts suggest that we lack systems and responsive systems to control those sorts of things. And so um, I propose one, that before people come into government, they have to go through an integrity audit. Yeah, an integrity audit be instituted by an integrated collection of the integrated institutions that Thomas alluded to, the LACC, the FIU, the National Police, the Ministry of Justice, and all of those connected to anti-graft um, controls in the country. I think including the Elections Commission. No one should be able to declare to go to stand for you. And when they're in government, the hope is that systems are built, yeah, responsive systems are built to ensure control and transparency throughout their tenure in government. And when people are processed through the courts of law, it's not enough to jail. Properties need to be taken away. The whole idea of asset recovery shouldn't be to shouldn't be running behind little things like taxes, and we need some serious action. Serious action. And all of that is a function of leadership. Who do we bring in to lead these organizations? Who do we bring in to lead those efforts? What how clean are they? What do their professional capabilities look like? How are we scrutinizing these people before we put them on? Because who you put in a position determines, in many instances, where that position and how that position is going to outflow in terms of generating the requisite results. And so it's important. I think all is not lost. It's just 6 months on the road, just like starting a football game. Yes, you stumble in the first 15 minutes. Let's see the first 6 months as the first 16 minutes of a 19-minute game. And with the hope that President Walker can reconsolidate, put his house in order. The too many mistakes coming out of his office, that's a shame. For the caliber of people we know to be in his office, it's too much going on. Even Emerson during wartime did not have as many problems as we're having today in a civil, non-violent situation. We should all know what we're doing. And so he needs to put his house in order. It has to start from the Minister of State and then ensure that the fight against corruption is objective, meaning it targets every sector that's affected and individual that's affected, not just relying on other reports from the past, but also should be able to address current situations as well. And I'll stop on that note. Thank you so much, Dennis, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And during Jimmy, your friend Sam Wallow said the takeaway of the night is unorthodox. Get comfortable with it. Remember Dick Cheney when they were talking about waterboarding? He said it's enhanced investigative techniques, right? So people always have
I need to remind Sam that unorthodox means contrary to what is usual, traditional, or accepted. Maybe he doesn't understand that part of unorthodox.
And meaning outside the Constitution.
There is something in Senegal they call lifestyle audit, where they audit you according to your lifestyle. If you work for the government, they look at you and say, how did you get 2 cars when
That's true.
Yeah, Senegal, they can arrest you. The LSCC for Senegal can go after you for just looking at your lifestyle and audit you and then grab you.
Thank you. Tom? your recommendation, so we can close.
Thank you, Dennis. Very good show. So I don't want to go back to all of the recommendations that have been provided, all valid recommendations. The thing I would want to add is today, one of the ways that governments are trying to address the issue of corruption is through digitization. Because corruption often takes place when you have people interacting humanly. Like I have to enter this office before this document is approved, then I enter the other office. Once it gets digitized and you have that separation between the service, the person who's providing the service and the person who's receiving the service, you can be able to minimize taxation, to minimize corruption. Even in taxation today, before when the revenue authorities used to bill people, they ask you to take it to the person address, go deliver the bill. And that's where the corruption can come from. When you go, then they interact. Today is being delivered electronically. I bill you, I send it to your email, or I find a way to send it to you. It can happen. And the government will have to push this issue of digitization. I tell you, for instance, in the public financial management space, there's an integrated public financial management system that was put in place as far back as I think around 2011, 2012. I think at that time, Amara has just taken over as finance minister. There are 7 modules that are in IFMIS. There's a module for budget development. There's a module for human resource management. Different ones, but Liberia has on the adoption. It has been very slow, and even when institutions adopt it, they leave it and they still do the manual process. Because anything that you do on IFMIS, there will be a trail. Even audit will become very easy. You just ask and go and follow what people have done. So what I would recommend is really for us to fast track the issue of digitization, especially in the public sector, and then go back to the laws that we have, like the councillor said. Some of our laws that don't have penalties and other things, we go back and strengthen them. And normally people who are not in this space, when they say institution, they think it's the building. You say PPCC. PPCC is not that building. PPCC is the law. The LACC is not the building. The LACC is the law. So let's really go back, look at public sector reform much more broadly. It is 20 some more years and the Civil War ended. We can't just keep crawling. And I will just end on this. Dr. Duke was talking about Senegal. Indonesia. I had some colleagues last year when we were in the program. The tax authority in Indonesia, they hire agents. They are all on social media. When you post a car, they will go to you and go ask, where you got the money from? How you bought a car? Have you filed your tax? So it's all over. You have to checkmate people and really follow them before the attitude of corruption will stop. If we just think it's going to stop by just taking one action, it's not going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and talking about corruption, the fight against corruption. I think from tonight we know that we can win the fight. It is too early to tell. The early signs are not suggesting that we are on good footings, but it's too early. We believe President Bouakai can course correct and do the right thing so that we can win the fight at least this time. Thank you again for coming. I want to thank our viewers. I want to thank even those who will watch later. Always focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Tomorrow, there's a new law school that is starting in Monrovia. Started by
like we don't have enough lawyers.
No, we still need more. There's a public one, so they want to start a private one. So they will be right here on Friday night debate. We want to debate it. Why you think we need new law school? So join us.
Who are the panelists coming?
Kwame Clement and Sey Balazer.
Okay.
The 2 people that are at the helm of it. So they want to come and
they're building the school. They're building the school.
Yeah. And for me, I wouldn't be on the show, but I support it 100%. I was a student. I was like one of the more radical students, and suffer casualty because the school was very badly run. I was student leader. And so yeah, they need a new law school because it has been very badly run in the past.
So
I can tell you that for sure.
Tomorrow, and let's talk about that. But they're going to be presented that information. We're going to have
I guess they can.
But again, thank you. Want to thank our viewers. At this time, we close with the song that says, "We are all Liberians, gentlemen." That's one thing. If we forget everything on the show, we should remember that. Have a good night and God bless you.
We are
Have a good night.
Liberians.